Our purpose for today, students will be able to analyze primary source documents about George Whitefield to discover why he captured so many people's attention. So I mentioned the Great Awakening. George Whitefield was like this really powerful preacher during the Great Awakening. So we're going to be able to look at primary source documents about him and see why he was so liked, why he was so popular. Okay? I think you guys will be able to be the historians today. L, our language purpose. What type of language do I want you guys to use? Remember last week we practiced sourcing and contextualizing? Yeah, we made this cheat sheet foldable. Okay, so when we talk with each other today, and I walk around, I want to see or to hear you all using these words sourcing and contextualizing to analyze the documents. Sourcing, who wrote it and why. Contextualizing, really trying to put yourself back in that time period, okay? And finally, your social purpose. What should we do socially at our tables? Talk with your partner or group to discuss the document. So there'll be times where you'll be able to talk with each other about the documents. Does anybody have any questions on the purpose for today? Established what the Great Awakening is. We did our prediction. We've got some notes on it. We're going to look at a couple of leaders of the Great Awakening movement. George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards. Take a look at them. First thing I know about them is their hairstyles, huh? Yeah.
Didn't they all wear like white covers?
Yeah, it looks like they have wigs on. Good, Diego. So these two were like the main guys of the Great Awakening. People listened to them back then. I kind of think of, who do we listen to when they say something nowadays? Kind of think of like Oprah. That's what, the president? Obama? Yeah. But something like more like a cultural popular movement would be.
Jerry Springer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So George Whitefield was like the Jerry Springer of the Great Awakening. People. Okay, we're going to look into that and look at George Whitefield. He was the more popular one of the two. So when we look at our primary source documents today, we're going to be answering this central question: why was George Whitefield so popular? All right. You guys will have a chance to do this for the second and third document, but for the first one, I'm just going to think aloud and show you how I would first source it, then put it in its context, and then read it to try and answer the central question for today. Why was George Whitefield so popular? Okay, so first, before I even read it, I'm going to look at who wrote it. What's the source? And that's at the bottom, and it says, The Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, 1793. Ben Franklin was a good friend of George Whitefield, though he did not agree with his religious beliefs. So from the source, this is what I have. It's an autobiography about Benjamin Franklin. So I know an autobiography, that's when someone writes something about themselves. Okay? That's the source. It's from Benjamin Franklin in 1793. I know the Great Awakening started in the early to mid 1700s. So 1793 is a long time after that. So already I'm thinking about time. That's a good 50 or so years after the Great Awakening has started, maybe even longer. So I'm a little worried about Benjamin Franklin's memory. I'm a little worried about his human memory, so I don't know if it's going to be entirely accurate because Franklin is trying to recall the past from a long time ago. Also, one thing I can't ignore here in the source is that Ben and George were good friends. Whitefield and Franklin were good friends. So I'm thinking, you don't really write bad things about your friends usually. Usually it's going to be favorable. So because they were friends, I'm thinking it's going to be good stuff about George Whitefield. And then finally, this is kind of throwing me off. It says, though Franklin did not agree with his religious beliefs. He didn't agree with Whitefield's beliefs. So they were friends, but he doesn't agree with them. So I'm not really sure if it's going to be favorable toward Whitefield or not. Okay, so before I read the document, that's what I do for sourcing, because now I have a better idea of what I'm going to read about. Okay, does anybody have their headphones in? If you need to take your headphones out. That's the source. Now I'm going to try and put it in its context as when I read it, try and put myself in the place. Okay, so now we're ready to read. I've looked at the source, and then did you notice at the bottom there's some vocabulary? Okay, so the underlined word benevolent means kind. Oratory means speech. So I'll keep that in mind as I read. Okay? So here I go. I'm going to put myself in my context, trying to put myself back as a colonist during the Great Awakening. Okay, so follow along. Go ahead and grab the document here and follow along as I read it aloud. Here we go. Mr. Whitefield went preaching all the way through the colonies to Georgia, where there were many helpless children unprovided for. The sight of their miserable situation inspired the benevolent heart of Mr. Whitefield with the idea of building an orphan house there, in which they might be supported and educated. Returning northward, he preached up this charity and made large collections. Okay, so I'm trying to think about this time where it's the Great Awakening. So far I have Mr. Whitefield who wants to open an orphan house. And to answer this question, why is he so popular? That could be one of the reasons why. People agree with him that he should open this orphan house. Okay, I'll read on and see what Franklin says about him. I happened to attend one of his sermons, in the course of which I realized he intended to finish with a collection, and I silently decided he should get nothing from me. Franklin thought the orphan house should be built in Philadelphia. Okay, so putting it in its context, if I were Franklin, so far I'm Benjamin Franklin, he's decided, Franklin, I'm not going to give this guy any money. There's going to be a collection. I'm going to keep my money right in my pocket because I'm a little upset. I wanted the orphan house to go in Philadelphia, and Whitefield wants it to go in Georgia. So let's see what happens. I had in my pocket a handful of copper money. So he's got some pennies, 3 or 4 silver dollars, and and 5 pieces in gold. Okay, so he's got some gold, some silver, and some pennies. As he proceeded, I began to soften and concluded to give the coppers. Another stroke of his oratory made me ashamed of that, and I decided to give the silver. And he finished so admirably, he finished so great, Whitefield did, that I emptied my pocket wholly into the collector's dish, gold and all. Okay, so again, being Franklin, if I'm trying to picture him there, he started out as this reluctant guy who was not going to give money, but apparently Whitefield is so good that by the end of the speech, Franklin had given him all his money. Okay, so that's answering the question, why was he so popular? Apparently he's such a good speaker, people are willing to give money for his cause. Okay, and then finally, this last paragraph, he had a loud and clear voice and articulated his words and sentences so perfectly that he might be heard and understood at a great distance, especially as his audiences, however numerous, were completely silent. He preached one evening, and I computed that he might well be heard by more than 30,000. Okay? So again, trying to put myself in that place to contextualize it, here's one man with his loud and clear voice speaking to somewhere maybe around 30,000 people. Okay, so try and put yourself in that place. What type of speaker would be able to command so many people? Okay. Does anybody have any questions how I first source the document and then put it in its context to try and put myself in the position? Does anybody have questions about that? Because then you all are going to do that with document B, the second document about Whitefield, and then I'll be able to walk around and see how you're using sourcing and contextualizing to analyze the document. It's time to sum it up now. You've had a chance to look at the documents. First, I showed you how I did one, then you did it together. All right, and now it's time to do this on your own. Kind of sum up what you think about George Whitefield and his connection to the Great Awakening movement. So, for your exit slip today, answer these 3 questions. Why was George Whitefield so popular? Okay, so thinking about those documents, put some evidence in your answer. Number 2, do you think he was dangerous like Henchman claimed? Or benevolent like Franklin called him? And who do you trust more? Think about your sourcing. Was Franklin a better source or Henchman? Who was more believable? And then finally, make the connection today. Now that you've read the documents, you know about the Great Awakening, could something like that happen today? Why or why not? Okay, so take some time with your exit slip, and that'll close it up for today.